and welcome to American Catholic History. If you like our podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and a great review wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Noelle Heaster-Crowe.
And I'm Tom Crow.
Today, we're talking about Father Stanley Rother, the first U.S.-born martyr and the second person to be beatified on U.S. soil. Father Stanley's story doesn't have big, amazing moments.
Until you get to the very end.
Right, of course. But up to that point, his story is one of simple faith, love, and absolute devotion to his flock, even if that meant death. Now, you first learned his story sort of incidentally while you were in seminary.
Yes, so I went to Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Emmitsburg, Maryland for 3 years from 2005 to 2008. While there, I first lived in the first floor of Gallagher Hall, which was a dormitory wing off the main building. To get to the first floor of Gallagher, you walked through a passageway that connected the two buildings. On the walls of that passageway hung a number of pictures of this young-looking priest, smiling in his official portrait, and then other pictures of the same priest in a tropical setting. In some, he was wearing a multicolored stole and sporting a gentle smile. In one, he's holding a child's hand and looking down at her, while other children are playing nearby. There was no label on the pictures, nor was there any context given anywhere, among those pictures on the wall. But it was clear by the placement that this was a significant priest who had done good work for the Lord and had a connection to Mount St. Mary's. Eventually, I did find out who he was, Father Stanley Rother, a 1963 grad of the Mount, and I found out that he'd been murdered in Guatemala, where he had served as a missionary. Then, I learned a lot more about him in 2007 when his cause for canonization officially opened, and I was asked to write a short article about him for the seminary newsletter.
So you knew a bit about him before most did.
Yeah, I guess I did. And honestly, it was learning his story in such a matter-of-fact way that first opened my eyes to the amazing, cloud of witnesses that we have as American Catholics. This was 6 years before I worked with Emily Chapman, then Emily Stimpson, on the American Catholic Almanac, so it was one of the first real indications that I had of the incredible stories that we have as Catholic Americans, but that most people just don't know anything about.
Yeah, true, right. And needless to say, you made sure he got into the almanac.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm sure I would have found his story anyhow, but that connection made him one of the earliest stories that I placed on the calendar.
So let's get into his story, where he came from, and how he ended up a martyr in far distant Guatemala. He was originally from the tiny rural farming community of Okarchee, Oklahoma, which, incidentally, I hear, boasts the oldest bar and best fried chicken in all of Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think I'd like to test that claim.
Not me. No chicken. No, thank you.
Yeah, good. More for me. But he was born in Okarchee in 1935. He was the oldest of 4 children in a German Catholic farming family. He grew up farming and learning all that comes with it, learning how to be resourceful, how to fix most anything, and that good things take time and patience and dedication if they are to flourish.
He also learned that you don't abandon what is in your care.
Yes, and that's a very important lesson.
Mm-hmm. He played sports and was an altar boy. During high school, he felt called to the priesthood, and after graduating, was sent by the Diocese of Oklahoma City-Tulsa to Assumption Seminary in San Antonio, Texas.
But things didn't go swimmingly. There was no question about his desire to be a priest or his spiritual life, but he struggled mightily in his academics. He failed Latin and had to retake a few important theology courses more than once.
Where have we heard of other priests who have struggled?
Yeah, really.
St. Joseph Cupertino or St. John Vianney, who also struggled with Latin and nearly wasn't ordained because of it.
Yeah, it's a good thing he was.
I know, right?
Eventually, the faculty at Assumption Seminary sent him back to Okarchee, telling his bishop that, in their mind, he wasn't priest material.
Which is sad, because while it certainly is important for a priest to have a firm grasp of theology and Latin, it seems a bit harsh to write off a man who really is trying and simply isn't a scholar.
I agree completely. I had a number of classmates at the Mount who struggled with academics, but who got ordained and are fantastic priests nowadays. They're in dioceses across the country where they're not dealing with scholars on a daily basis. They are just simple, hardworking parish priests, and the more important skills are how to relate to people and how to just be a good priest. Fortunately, Stanley Rother's bishop believed that this was the sort of priest that he could be, so he sent him to Mount St. Mary's in Maryland.
Now, there are no reports that he suddenly developed a proficiency in Latin, But he did graduate in 1963 and was ordained that May.
And good for Mount St. Mary's and the Bishop of Oklahoma City seeing the good holy priest rather than the struggling student.
Definitely. The new Father Rother spent a few years at assignments in the Oklahoma City area before, in 1968, he requested a rather significant new challenge. The Diocese of Oklahoma City-Tulsa had a mission in Santiago Atitlan, Guatemala, a small community of Tzutujil people about 50 miles west of Guatemala City.
The Tzutujil were an indigenous people who descended from the Mayans. They lived mostly in poverty, and their native language was a difficult tongue that had no alphabet or system of written characters. When the mission church in Santiago Atitlan needed a new priest, Father Rother volunteered to go be a missionary priest, and the bishop accepted.
So now, a priest who nearly didn't become a priest because he couldn't handle Latin was heading to Guatemala, where Spanish is the major language, and then to an even more obscure village where they spoke an even more difficult language.
Yeah, sounds like a recipe for failure.
It does, doesn't it? Except that Father Rother had something that couldn't be measured. Love. He loved these poor peasant farmers and ardently desired to help them know God better. He poured himself into the work. He struggled, but within a year or two, he became proficient in Spanish and even in Tzutujil. Eventually, he was preaching in Tzutujil. Somewhere along the way, he even helped translate the New Testament, many prayers, and even the Mass. And this was after the new missal was promulgated, so such a thing was suddenly allowed.
Interestingly, even though Tzutujil was a verbal language only and did not have an alphabet, Father Rother wrote out the entire Tzutujil version of the New Testament using the English alphabet and its sounds to transliterate the words. A copy of that New Testament is on display at Mount St. Mary's, and I believe his translation is still used.
And all that from someone who struggled with academics. Amazing what the grace of the sacrament will do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And not just holy orders.
I was going to say, we know about that, don't we?
You know, the instructors at Mount St. Mary's would admonish us seminarians from time to time, remember, your vocation is to be a priest, not to be a seminarian. Some of the guys seemed super comfortable in the seminary atmosphere, and you wondered how they'd fare once they had to go, be priests. Father Rother was clearly the other way around. Yes, seminary was vital, but this man was not made for seminary. He was made to be a priest.
Very much so. And there's something about priests that are so naturally priests who don't have to put on airs or try to impress people with their outward show, but just do the work and more or less just let Christ flow through them. And that's what it's about, not winning people over or personal gain, just be Christ. Stanley Rother clearly was that man, bringing Christ, particularly Christ in the sacraments, to the people. But the sacraments and prayers weren't all he did with and for the people. All those things he learned as a farmer back in Oklahoma came in very handy. He helped the people learn new farming techniques that helped improve their crops. And when he was able, he wasn't shy about getting out there with the people and working in the fields.
He also did radio broadcasts from the mission, sharing prayers and lessons in language. Imagine him teaching language, and lessons in mathematics.
He absolutely poured himself out for the people in every way he could.
Yes, he became much beloved of the people. And since they had no equivalent of Stanley in their language, he became known as Padre Aplas, which translates to Father Francis, since Francis was his middle name.
But it was everything he did to help the impoverished people of Santiago Atitlan ended up signing his death warrant.
Yeah, no good deed goes unpunished.
Guatemala at the time was in the throes of a long civil war, which began in the 1960s and continued well into the 1990s. It was part of the Cold War and pitted a dictatorial right-wing government against left-wing socialist and communist groups. The leftist rebels claimed to be the champions of the peasants and indigenous people, even if, like those in Father Rother's community, those people had no interest in the workers' paradise they were pushing.
Father Rother and the church in Guatemala in general didn't take sides in the political upheaval. Their care was for souls, helping the people get to heaven and to live better lives here on earth. But neutrality did not matter to either the government forces nor the leftist groups trying to overthrow the government. In both cases, they viewed anyone who was not with them as against them. So neutrality put the church in the government's crosshairs because any institution not with them was a threat.
In the decades of fighting, many priests and religious lost their lives, along with many of the faithful. Father Rother opposed the presence of government troops in the area of Santiago Atitlan, wanting the people to live in peace.
In letters home, Father Rother wrote about the many men from his own community who were abducted, tortured, and murdered by one or the other side. The bodies would sometimes be left outside his rectory as a warning. Some bodies were never found.
In one harrowing account, Father Rother wrote about a popular catechist, a 30-year-old father of two, who was coming to the rectory, and just as he arrived, a car with government soldiers sped up. They jumped out, wrestled the man into the car, and drove off. Father Rother only just came out as they were getting him into the car, and he could do nothing about it lest they take him too or kill him on the spot. By 1980, it was clear that the danger was getting closer to him. He came one day to find his radio station destroyed and the man who ran it murdered.
In December of 1980, in the teeth of his great peril, he wrote a letter to parishes back in Oklahoma declaring, "The shepherd cannot run at the first sign of danger." Then he followed that with an appeal for prayer. "Pray for us, that we may be a sign of the love of Christ for our people, that our presence among them will fortify them to endure these sufferings in preparation for the coming of the kingdom."
Father Rother wrote that he did not want to leave, but said he would do so if ordered. That order came in January of 1981, when his name was found at number 8 on a death list. Reluctantly, he returned to his family home in Okarchee, Oklahoma. He helped on the farm and he offered Mass in the area. But he knew it wasn't right. He had to return to be with his people, to bear their suffering and tend to their spiritual needs. He decided that he had to be there for Easter. So he requested permission to return. His bishop reluctantly agreed.
Yeah, and this reminds me of one of my favorite verses in Scripture, John 11:16. The Apostle Thomas says to his fellow apostles who are trying to avoid a clear danger that Jesus is clearly intending to walk right into, Thomas says to them, "Let us also go that we may die with him." Thomas knew that if you're where Christ wants you to be, then all shall be well, whatever the outcome. Father Rother seemed to have that same spirit.
He certainly did. He arrived back in Santiago Atitlan in April 1981 and went about his work, but he knew he was being watched. To increase his own personal security, he would change which room in the rectory he slept in every now and then, so they couldn't just sneak in through a window and get him in his sleep. But the forces intent on his death were determined. The day came. In the early hours of the morning on July 28th, men with guns entered the rectory. They didn't find Father Rother in his room, but they found a youth, the assistant pastor's younger brother, who was staying at the rectory, to show them where Father Rother was sleeping.
The boy, fearing for his own life, led the gunman to where Father Rother was asleep. Before the gunman entered, the boy shouted, "Father, they've come for you!" And then he fled. The men crashed into the room. They intended to subdue Father Rother and take him away alive for the usual torture and gruesome death. But they had never wrestled with an Oklahoma farmer before. Father Rother would not be overcome. He fought with them, yelling, "Shoot me here!" They struggled mightily, but finally realized they could not drag him off. So they did shoot him, twice in the head.
After they fled, the assistant pastor found Father Rother dead in a pool of his own blood. He woke the Carmelites who lived in the adjoining convent. They came and knelt by the body to pray. An American sister who was working at the same mission came, and as she prayed, she scooped blood into jars for preservation. They all immediately knew the greatness of the man who had left them. The veneration of Father Rother as a martyr was instant. The small room where he died became a shrine.
Father Rother's body was flown back to Oklahoma, but, at the request of the people of Santiago Atitlan, his heart was removed and sent back to where it had been since 1968. It remains to this day in Santiago Atitlan, along with the jars of his blood from that night.
In the weeks following Father Rother's murder, 3 men were arrested and put on trial for the murder. They confessed to breaking into the rectory to burgle it, but said they were confronted by Father Rother, and in their effort to get out, they shot him. No one believed this was the case. Most believed that these men were innocent, but were put on trial as a pretense of justice by the government. Most familiar with the circumstances believe it was a hit by a paramilitary group, and the government engaged in a cover-up. Years later, those men were freed when an appellate court overturned their conviction. Father Rother's killers are still unknown.
Apart from Father Rother, 9 other priests were murdered in Guatemala in 1981. Overall, the Guatemalan Civil War left anywhere from 140,000 to 200,000 people dead and missing, many of them Catholic priests and religious. But none other had the instant recognition and widespread veneration that Father Rother had.
Beginning on the 1-year anniversary of his death, July 28, 1982, and continuing annually to this day, a mass is offered on the spot where he died, with people from all over Guatemala coming to mourn and venerate their martyr.
In 2007, his cause for canonization opened in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and in September of 2017, Pope Francis officially recognized that Father Stanley Rother died a martyr for the faith, and at an outdoor mass in downtown Oklahoma City attended by more than 20,000 people, Stanley Rother became the second person beatified on American soil.
In 2019, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City broke ground on a large shrine dedicated to Blessed Stanley Rother, and it opened its doors in 2023. The shrine church is built in the Spanish mission style to evoke Father Rother's missionary parish in Santiago Atitlan, and the mission of the shrine is in part to serve the spiritual needs of the growing Hispanic population of the region. Hopefully soon, the Vatican will complete their process, and Blessed Stanley Rother, the big-hearted, simple farm boy from Oklahoma, the shepherd who could not run at the first sign of danger, will be known by all as Saint Stanley Rother. Blessed Stanley Rother, pray for us. This has been American Catholic History. If you enjoy American Catholic History, please become a supporter. We've got great perks for supporters. Get information on how to become a supporter and the perks at americancatholichistory.org/support.
Also on our website, sign up for our newsletter, learn more about Blessed Stanley Rother, see about our pilgrimages, and find other great stories from American Catholic history.
We also love the great reviews our listeners leave. Those and the 5-star ratings help others find us. You can email us feedback, questions, tips for episode topics, or other comments at feedback@americancatholichistory.org. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/American Catholic History, on Instagram at ACH_podcast, and follow us on Twitter at ACH1513. I'm Noelle Heaster-Crowe.
And I'm Tom Crow.
Thanks for listening to American Catholic History, brought to you by the support of listeners like you.